Thank you all for joining us this hot afternoon. Sanjoy, yeah, thank you. Sanjoy has already talked about the book a little bit. The session is about Lal Salaam. I read this book and greatly enjoyed it, and I'll tell you why. It is foremost a thriller, and it does not drag for 1 second. If you start reading it, you're likely not going to be able to put it down until you're done with it. It's also there's also other things going for it. It handles difficult subjects, and not one difficult subject, several difficult subjects with great sensitivity, and it has some characters that are going to stay with you long after you've read the book. They're very strong, and they are really, really interesting characters. So those of you who have not read the book, I highly recommend that you go to the festival bookshop after this session and read it tonight. Nothing of what I am going to discuss today will include spoilers, so the pleasure of reading it is not going to be taken away. We are going to be talking about some larger issues around the book and writing. What I will not be talking about is party politics. And the reason for that is that one of the things I really admire about my interlocutor today is that she lives a multi-hyphenated existence. She is many different things. And today she's here as a writer, and I feel genuinely that this book deserves all the half an hour, 40 minutes of time that I have been given to speak with her. We will, of course, take questions from the audiences after I'm done. So with that, thank you for joining me. Congratulations on a spectacular political victory. And congratulations on this book. It's a fantastic book. Like I said, I loved reading it. And the first question I want to ask you, therefore, is because the primary reason I love the book is because I love thrillers. And we don't get to read enough good Indian thrillers, right? So I'm going to start with a question about the genre itself. It's not easy to write a fast-paced thriller. It is just simply not easy. I know that as a writer. When it comes to thrillers, where do you get your inspirations from?
I live a fast-paced life.
Oh, of course.
So it is not difficult for me to write in that fashion. But I think, Pragya, that this is a book that I had been thinking of for a decade. And I knew the book end to end even before I put pen to paper. The fact that I had not only researched about elements that you find in the book, but I've also personally traversed in those frontiers myself for 2 decades, made writing it a bit easy. What I find fascinating is that it came as a surprise for many. Sanjoy has been more than kind about how he received the book. If anybody knows Sanjoy, you know that there is a quick roll of the eye when he's told to do something unusual, and especially from those that are known as nationalists or rightists. So I think it was quite an effort for him to pick up that book, go through it. But the fact that beyond a few pages, he forgot my ideology and the story captured him. For me, that is the modicum of success I see as an author, that it didn't matter who wrote it. Maybe the publisher thought that the name would attract somebody to pick up the book. But the fact that you spent good, productive time with it because you liked the story, I think, is something that I celebrate as an author.
So you said you've been with the book for a decade, right? Now, this is the subject matter of the book is politically sensitive. It is a political hot potato in many ways. It's also a national crisis that we've been dealing with for many, many years. I'm interested in but at the same time, you've grown up in Delhi, you've been in Bombay, your constituencies have been, again, in Gujarat, of course, now in Amethi. What is it about this area and this particular crisis and this particular subject that attracted you so much and that you wanted to travel and delve into it?
The commercialization of the movement, which was supposed to liberate people. The fact that it is a 200 billion rupee industry is something that is not spoken of. The fact that there is a taxation system that has been undertaken by the Naxals. The fact that women are raped in Naxal camps and nobody speaks about it. The fact that children are trafficked by Naxals and it does not make headline news. The fact that personnel who are in paramilitary forces are killed and there is a dreaded silence about it. The book emanated from my participation in a television debate where one of the panelists was very nonchalant about the death of 72 CRPF personnel and said, "Vardi pehni hai, to obviously inko pata hai ki inki maut hogi. Why would you get so upset about it?" And at that very moment when this panelist was speaking, I wondered, what if one family member of that officer was watching that debate? How ungrateful would we sound if we do not stop that conversation right there and said that if there is a man or a woman in uniform, they deserve as much respect as any other individual. So if you look at the book, you will see that the romanticization of the Naxal violence is shred to pieces in a fictional way. You will see that officers who have risen beyond the call of duty, who have withstood the tugs and the pulls and the pushes of the system, and yet been honest, they are celebrated. So for me, the book is a celebration of sacrifices of many an individual who will never be spoken of, but who believed in the Constitution, upheld the values of that Constitution, not take up arms against your own country. And I think that this is a book as a tribute to them. The anger that emanated a decade ago, I think I productively put to rest when I wrote the book.
So, you know, it's interesting that you talked about how strongly you feel about the issue. It's very evident to anyone who will read the book that it's also been greatly researched. It's not simply based on some opinions you have formed. So there is, you know, there is a strong feeling that goes in. There is a lot of research that goes in. But what tends to happen with a lot of books like this, and that is what surprised me about the book, is that it just ends up being a fictionalized extrapolation of this is what I think, which is not what your book is. So everything you're saying right now is the book is not sort of, let me tell you what I think about the crisis and I've made some cardboard cutouts and they will just speak on my behalf. That's not what the book is. And it's not easy as a writer to feel something very strongly, to go out and research it, and then somehow put it in the background and let the story tell itself. Okay, so I'm very interested in that process of research, of knowing when to stop researching, when to let the characters breathe. I know writing process is not something easy to talk about, but whatever you can share would be valuable.
I think it is a challenge to transcribe data into emotion. It is a challenge to look at police evidence. It is difficult to look at investigations. And yet, knowing the truth, even keep parts of it away from your fiction. It is difficult to transform a very evocative journey where you have seen people blown to smithereens just for serving their country, and yet restrain yourself enough to say that this needs to withstand commercial scrutiny. For me, like I said, it was a journey of transforming my rage. It was a journey of finding a reflection of my own experiences and yet making it so story worthy that any individual who's never known of the Naxal movement, any individual who's never delved into that research, does not feel strange when they pick up the threads of the story. As you have been kind enough to say, that you enjoyed it as a thriller. And my endeavor from day one was, and I've had the opportunity, blessedly, of writing for television. So I wanted to ensure that whoever picks up the book does not put it down till the story is completely told.
So, you know, it's interesting that you started this conversation by saying that, and even Sanjoy mentioned that he was skeptical when he received the book.
Sanjoy is devastated that the book was good.
Yes, of course. I'm sure he was devastated. I mean, I was partly devastated that it was good. But my followers on Twitter,
You've been cancelled because you liked the book.
followers on
He was
Twitter are
devastated because he
extremely
liked the book.
My followers on Twitter are extremely devastated that I liked the book.
And I made the mistake of telling Sanjoy, I thought everybody was liberal. And he just looked at me, he said, which world are you living in? But I think the fact that the book can evoke such a productive emotion as just a book from people like Sanjoy or you for that matter, by now you have read through so many manuscripts that I'm sure that you pick up many with a sense of disdain, many with a sense of boredom. The fact that you were kind enough to pick up the book, the fact that the book fascinated you enough to give your time to it, and when you finished the story, you had a modicum of satisfaction. Oh, this was time well spent. I think that is what, for me, is the greatest joy as an author.
That's always the greatest joy for a writer. But, you know, I mean, at least personally, for me as a writer, I don't care if 4 people read what I write, but I want them to read it with an open mind. I mean, that's the only thing I expect. And I was wondering, now that the book is out, what kind of reactions have you got beyond Sanjoy and me? Some things that might have delighted you, some things that might have surprised you, some things that might have disappointed you. I'm very curious to know.
The consistent reaction has been that we could not put it down till we finished the story. There was one very, I think as a part of the strategy for putting the book out there and talking about it, in the national capital, I have a very celebrated gentleman look at me and said, "You can write very well in English, don't you?" And I felt, was he living under a rock? But for me, what, again, like I said, brings me great satisfaction is the fact that this is a new genre for me. The other aspect, which I think needs introspection for me, not only as an author, but also the industry at large. There are, yes, but a few writers in India who write thrillers, but fewer still are women. And I remember I kind of blinded the name on the manuscript and gave it to a senior author. And I said, "Ki aap ye padhenge, mere paas ye manuscript aayi hai." And that author has written non-fiction on Naxalism. When the author read it, he turned around, called me and said, "Ye jis bhi sajjan ne likhi hai, unko aap meri or se shubhkamna dijiye." The presumption was that it's a thriller. It has aspects of violence. It could only have been written by a man. It was extremely exciting. So I think that as an author, the fact that my name did not matter, the story did. My gender did not matter, the story did, is something for me, I think, a great lesson from this journey.
So talking of gender, the book is carried in a sense by your central character, right? And he's a young male officer, right? I was wondering if you had any moments of sort of hesitancy in writing from the POV of a young male officer. And I think that will lead us to a larger question about the paramilitary forces. But for now, this is what I want you to answer.
I had a question posed to me, "Kash ye officer mahila hoti." And I said, "Kyun nahi, aap mahila lekhika hain." So that means that if it's a male author, they should only write about men. If it's a female author, they should only write about women. I do not understand the segregation creatively. It was also surprising for many people that I could write in a male voice. And they said, well, and the second surprise for people was that I have written the character of the female journalist as a chirpy, principled young lady who's a bit flirtatious. And people said, "Aapne ye kaise likh diya?" So I think that there were many norms and prejudices set in the heads of many. When they picked up the book, I'm happy that I surprised them. And I'm happy that the characters captured them so that they were compelled to ask me, "Why not change the gender? Oh my God, the journalist that you've written about, she seems to be a happy lady." As though I would write about a female journalist in the most, I wouldn't want to use the word, it's too strong a word, but as though I would not do justice to a young, bubbly, professional female journalist in my book. And some people felt that, well, you know, you're very stern when it comes to female journalists. How come you've been so kind to a journalist in a book? So the fact that aspects of my personality have possibly overwhelmed expectations with regards to certain characters in the book is also fascinating.
No, it is. But I want to stay with it for a second with the paramilitary forces. You know, you spoke about in the beginning that you were really sort of disturbed by the callous nature in which someone commented about the death of 72 CRPF personnel. What ends up happening in our country is that we talk a lot about, we talk a lot about the army, not enough maybe, but we do talk about the army. But where the paramilitary forces are concerned, even I was having a conversation with Manoj Bajpai on this very stage 2 days ago, and we were talking about even the depiction of police officers, right? In Bollywood, if you see your Hindi cinema, it's gone from sympathetic characters who just came late to, when the hero had solved everything, to downright villains and criminals and so on and so forth, right? And the rest of the paramilitary forces are just absent from the narrative. They're invisibilized. Now, you do talk about the sacrifice, but you also portray them in a way that's so real, which I have had the privilege to, witness because, one's reported from some of these areas, but also my husband has worked with the Delhi police. And for me, that was so utterly real, who these people were, what they, the resources they lacked, their lives, their inner lives, it was just so, And it was such a humane portrait. I'm very curious to know, from that point when you get interested in this topic to when you start really delving into it, what are the sorts of revelations that are made to you, that your eyes are open to where the paramilitary forces are concerned?
Well, I've had family members who've served and currently serving. I've had the opportunity of talking to officers who have now retired, officers who are still in service. So when I meet an officer, I look beyond the uniform and I'm privileged to have conversations with them. I think one of the greatest challenges they face is that they are okay with the day-to-day struggle. They somehow feel a sense of rage, or for that matter, dissatisfaction or distaste for the nonchalance with which they are dismissed from public narratives. For me, it's been a great privilege to write and reflectedly so on the paramilitary forces. But to go back to your question to a particular actor about the portrayal of police officers, so they are either creatively criminalized on screen or there is a modicum of buffoonery assigned to them. And my privilege has been that the officers so described in the book and the way that they investigate the legal challenges they face, those I have managed to, with a sense of humility, bring about after extracting their experiences from their own services. So I think that, yes, when you check into an airport, the CISF officer that you see, they have stories of service and sacrifice that need to be recognized. Many of us are in such a rush, in such a hurry, and have stopped to check. We are not very kind with our behavior or with our words. So for me, it's a great privilege that no matter which officer I meet, no matter what their so-called stature or in the hierarchy of the organization, I always find time to say thank you on behalf of every mindful and well-meaning Indian.
You know, you touched upon this earlier. You talked about the female journalist character, and she's lovely. But what also was interesting to me is that, you know, it's not fair to say that you've depicted the world of officers, and normally these conflicts are projected as men fighting men, right? And the voices of women, they're completely invisibilized, right? Now, what's interesting to me is that, of course, your lead character is a man. You've done justice to the character. You've done justice to other men who are in the book. But there is a humanism that underpins your book. And that's also interesting because, you know, you talked about how you had to work your rage out of writing, because it's not the rage that speaks, it's the humanism that speaks in the book, at least when you're reading it. But it's not devoid of the female perspective. Now, I don't want to give too much away about the characters, but I do want to know a little bit more about how you approach them, where they came to you from.
Many of these characters and characteristics are something that I've seen in my 2 decades of interface with people across all services, which includes people in the media. And as somebody who emanated from the field of media, these are aspects that I've written about before. I have written about female and male journalists before for television. So for me, there were aspects of certain behavior patterns or characteristics that I tried to draw from my own life experiences. But I was very mindful of the fact that I am ultimately writing a fiction. So I would not want you to read a character and say that they exist in real life. But yes, if a police officer or a paramilitary force officer picks up the book, or for that matter, even an army officer picks up the book, they will look at the aspects of investigation and say, yes, this happens. They will look at the aspects of evidence gathering, or for that matter, the legal processes, the judicial processes, and say, yes, I have gone through certain aspects, what is depicted in the book. So for me, it was an amalgamation of all of that, an assimilation of all experiences, all characteristics.
Now, the most important question, how the hell do you get time to write?
I have insomnia that helps.
No, I'm serious. You need to tell me more about this, because I feel utterly useless. I mean, I take days to come up with one article. How are you? What is your writing? When do you write? Do you need quiet to write? Do you need to switch off from everything to write?
No, I've never been, as a creative personality, somebody who's very method driven. I remember I did make true on screen some of the most obnoxious thing that you could ever imagine. Having a man dead and then having him come back alive and behaving as if everything is hunky-dory, and having that male character change every next Monday and asking, "Wahi banda hai ki change ho gaya hai?" I've done all of that. And never have I indulged in the so-called method that many enunciate. Because I think that when you're blessed with creative prospects in life, and as natural as you can be, I think that creativity has larger acceptance. For me, if you look at the acknowledgements for that matter in the book, I wrote it between a car drive from Noida to my office, because my editor called and said, listen, we are just waiting to go to print, and the only problem is that you've not sent in the acknowledgements. So even the acknowledgements are not one of those rudimentary acknowledgements. There is a reflection of my past and my experiences in it. And I told her, I said, listen, wait, I'll just send it to you in 10 minutes. And she was like, are you nuts? I'm like, no, no, no. I mean, she should have known by then, but still. But that's how I did the writing. In every time that I found free, be it at 12:31 in the night or 4 in the morning or on a flight, I wrote.
So this is your first work of fiction, yes, but you've been writing for a very, very long time. Yes. Have you tasted blood? Are there more stories that you're waiting to tell, or are you going to switch up the genre in what you write next?
I am never enamored by any success of mine. This is not the first success that I've met. And the reason is that you, in some way, stifle your own growth when you take your success very seriously. I find myself very blessed that people normally have a successful career in one field. I've been blessed that I've succeeded as an actor. Post-Amethi, people would not begrudge me my success as a politician. And the fact that one of the most accomplished voices in literature or in the book industry today, like Sanjoy for that matter, has given the respect that my book deserves. So in 3 different fields to be a success, it's not a joke. The fact that God has been kind, that I have succeeded, I would not call it tasting blood. I would possibly describe it as acceptance of a blessing. Will I not write a thriller again? What will I write? I think the beauty of writing is that if you're liberated enough to write a good story and you're lucky enough to find a good publisher, then you're sorted. But if you write because you want to fill in a structure of a publisher, an agent, or a typology of writing, then you never succeed.
So, I was talking tasting blood in terms of telling stories more than the success, but I get your point of view. One thing that I want to talk to you about this multi-hyphenate existence. But before that, you said you're blessed in having had success in many different fields, but success is not something that one can take for granted. You just have to, like the Gita says, show up and do the karma, right? And keep working. Lots of people, and particularly women, I'm not saying only women, we tend to fall prey to what is called the imposter syndrome, right? We keep asking ourselves, are we good enough to do this? Are we, what qualification do I have to do this? Or do I have to write this? And that's one of the many things that holds people back, especially women, like I said. Please give me tips. And I know lots of people listening to this will feel inspired by it, on how not to doubt yourselves and just go ahead and do what you want to do. You want to write a fiction book, you do it. Read books.
Read books. I was chained to my father's bookshelf. And I think that when you start reading pretty young and you start reading an assortment of stories, you somehow gain the capacity to let your imaginations with hard work turn into reality. I come from a family which was barely having a modest income. When I was born, my parents had just $150. And my first job got me 200 rupees. So it's not as if I came from a flourished background. And I remember when I was 10 years old and we barely had anything to eat, I looked at my mom and I said, one day I will make it. And I got a tight whack. She said, look around you. What about your circumstances tells you that you will make it? And I think that strength comes from the imagination of the books that I read. And I read an assortment. I would read The Black Beauty and I would read Charles Dickens, and then I would read Archie comics or Supandi for that matter. The fact that you're not prejudiced because you read almost everything. That has been one of my greatest strengths. The fact that you will not be servile to somebody else's thought or point of view about you is something I think will bring you great capacities to call out challenges that are before you. And like I said, the fact that you are not so enamored by your success, or for that matter, burdened by your failure, I think that again is a great way to keep yourself going. And Pragya, I just have one life. I want to squeeze every possibility and opportunity into it. Uh, I am also mindful of the fact that everything I do will not succeed. I lost a mate in 2014, but I know that once I've set my mind to it, I end up doing everything I want to do.
Final question before I open it up to the audience. And this is really just about starting from where you left off. We are always told to stick to our lanes. Middle class boys, girls, stick to your lane. Do one thing properly. Don't take risks. Worry about failure.
Any lane, I make my own road.
But you decided this when you were a teenager, right? And I want to know a little bit. I want to get to know that teenager a little bit. I want to ask her what was her guiding force in saying, I will live my own life and I'll live in my own way.
Maybe a Bengali mother. That helps. A tenacious mother helps. A mother who recognizes audacity and tells you that it's okay to be audacious. Many a times your audacity is stifled because you are told that you possibly do not have the capacities to serve your enterprise. Many a times a fear is instilled in you because you are cautioned against failure. My mother was happy to have me fail, as long as I worked diligently, as long as I was honest to myself. And I think that makes it possible. And like I said, I'm not going in anybody's lane. I'm making my own road and I'm buying my own vehicle. And it's my foot on the pedal. And I've got the steering wheel of my car in my hands.
Well, may your tribe increase. With that, I know there'll be tons of questions, so I will open it up to the audience. I have a request. Let's be let's be kind. Let's make sure that we can get in as many questions. No, not to her, not to her. She can withstand anything. But let's be kind to your, to fellow listeners, so more people can ask questions. Keep your questions to the point and crisp, and please make sure they're actual questions. Thank you very much. Should I do it? Yeah, I'll bundle them. But do you want me to take it? Okay. Right in front.
Good afternoon, Madam Irani. My name is Saket Suman. I'm the author of The Psychology of a Patriot. It was published the last Independence Day. My question to you is, why did you decide to write a fiction book instead of a non-fiction book? The reason I ask you is because a lot of conversation that took place, especially from a woman who's right now a minister in the government, a lot of the people here will tend to take that on face value and accept it as non-fiction. And Pragya, आपने आम को काट के और छील के खाना कब से शुरू किया? Thank you very much.
ये मेरा मंच नहीं है, आपको मुझसे जो सवाल पूछने हैं आप पहले पूछ लेना.
Let me just answer Saket, since he's looking into psychologies of many patriots. I think if you are interested in research from the year 2006 to the year 2009, when my government was not in a position of service, the then government, in fact, articulated how 316 national projects were hit by commercial Naxal needs. This is not my research. This is research of the previous government. The fact that the 200 billion rupee industry that I spoke of in the beginning of my conversation with Pragya is something which is manifested in the previous government's documentation. But I compliment you, Saket. There's nobody else who could have attracted attention to his nondescript book like you have today.
The lady in front, please. We're now going to take a couple of questions so she can answer them together. Lady in front, please. Yes.
Namaste, ma'am. My name is Prerna. I would like to know, like, in your view, is today's youth reluctant to join the defense forces? Are they looking for a stable job? Is that the major reason? Like, what's your view on that?
No, Prerna, I've just met the family of a serviceman who lost his life in his 20s. I don't see any reluctance in that family's eyes to send another child back to the Indian Army. But I think that while you serve, men and women do so in uniform, there is a lot of service that you can do, even in the manufacturing sector. I've had the privilege of being the textiles minister of our country. In the year 2020, our country till the month of March did not produce a single PPE suit. We did not have any raw material. We did not have any machines. There was a global lockdown. And in those lockdown moments, we had from 0 to 1,100 companies established in India in just 3 months. And we became the second largest exporters in the world. And we did so by realigning our manufacturing strengths. And that was done. 80% of that workforce was female. And all of them were indigenous patriots.
Good afternoon, ma'am. My question to you as a woman, now like you are an actor, then you are a politician, and now like a writer. What was that one turning event in your life which like motivated you to write this book? And like I want to know a little about your career as an actor too.
Well, I'm alive. That's motivation enough. And I think that the fact that life gives you so much, that I had no time in my life for malice, that I had no time in my life for missed opportunities, that I had no time in my life to sacrifice myself at the altar of failure. So I didn't set out to be an actor. That was an area where my parents had absolutely no influence. Media was the only business where my father knew nobody. And I was insistent that I'll make a career for myself for which nobody else gets to take credit for. And I did the most unusual jobs. It's very easy to talk about realities. It's very difficult to serve imagination as though it's an everyday reality for people across the country. The fact that that was a program that went to 56 countries, the fact that they are repeating the damn thing even today without making any payments to any artists, is something that I think is one of my greatest treasures.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Unlike your protagonist, SP Vikram, I am Colonel Salil, ma'am. I am from Indian Army. And first of all, I'd like to thank you for a wonderful portrayal of the armed forces that you have brought out in your book. And my question to you is, where this highway, when now this road is going to become a highway, so where this highway going to lead us next as your destination?
पता नहीं वो प्रज्ञा पे डिपेंड करता है वो कितने आम छील कर खाने वाली है. But Colonel, on behalf of every Indian who's seated here, we just want to join forces to say thank you for your service. You've served us well. We are very proud of your service and we are very grateful to men and women in uniform. किसी को भी दे दीजिए भाई साहब जिनका हाथ खड़ा है.
वो वहां जो शर्ट में है, ब्लैक एंड व्हाइट शर्ट में जो है.
Good afternoon, ma'am. This is Rajat. My question is very simple and basic. Like, ma'am, what was your thinking process when things were not going in your way? Like, we middle class population daily goes through these things. No, things are not
रजत
going
कहाँ
our
से
way.
हो?
I'm Rajasthan only, Jodhpur. Yeah.
जिसके पास कुछ ना हो उसके पास खोने के लिए कुछ बचता नहीं है. मुझे याद है कि जब बंबई में मेरे पास नौकरी नहीं थी, पिताजी ने मुझसे ये कहा कि दिल्ली लौट आओ, तुम्हारा ब्याह कर देंगे, नौकरी तलाशने की जरूरत नहीं है. और मैंने अपने पिताजी से कहा कि मैंने पूरी जिंदगी उनकी बेटी बनकर गुजार दी, आगे वाली जिंदगी किसी की पत्नी बनकर गुजार दूंगी, लेकिन जो पढ़ा, जो समझा, जो सीखा, उसको कब जीऊंगी. तो जब मुश्किल घड़ी आती है, जेब में पैसे नहीं होते, तो मैं इतना ही कहूंगी, ये याद रखना कि फ्रॉम दैट डेप्थ यू कैन ओनली फ्लाई हाई. बस मुश्किल घड़ी में हिम्मत मत हारना. If you are absolutely confident of what you're doing, it does not matter who says what. Continue to believe in yourself, because even if nobody does believe in you or your idea, as long as you believe, you will thrive, you will succeed.
Good morning, ma'am. I'm Ayushi Joshi, an engineering student. Ma'am, you have such a successful career so far and you've dabbled in so many things. But as life is, eventually you will fail. Like it will come. Sometimes you will fail and it's a phase.
No, she's right.
then you try again and you succeed. And you know objectively that's what is going to happen. But that slump that you get in the middle, when you're just dejected, you know it is going to pass, but how do you get yourself out of it?
So Ayushi, I'm not a psychologist, but I'm sure you've gone through your own measure of challenges. But count your blessings that in your entire life, if you had that one person who loves you, even if they don't believe you, if they love you, then you're blessed. अब साल 2014 में मैं अमेठी से चुनाव हारी थी आयुषी, तो तुमने जो कहा वो सच है, कभी ना कभी आप फेल करोगे, लेकिन सक्सेस किस लिए चाहिए आपको? Why do you want to succeed? If you need to have, that is a conversation you need to have with yourself. I was fighting a legacy that was bleeding my country dry. I was not fighting for myself. And I was adamant कि मैं तब तक लड़ूंगी जब तक जीतूंगी नहीं. और अभी जो चुनाव गया उसमें उनकी जमानत जब्त हो गई अमेठी में. So you have to, yes, you will fail. But you know, one of the greatest joys of failing, it teaches you who truly loves you. It teaches you who truly supports you. It teaches you who will accept you irrespective of your failure. So remember them and be with them when you succeed.
There's a question right at the back. हम सब सामने से लिए जा रहे हैं. Right at the back, the gentleman with the hat, please.
Good afternoon, ma'am, and thank you for your empathy and salutation for forces and your multi-hyphenated career. I am a doctor, and 30 years ago, I was seeing CRPF Naujwans coming shot in their head, and I still see them fighting the same war. I treat their family members, and I see their agony when they are posted in classified positions, their family not available to them, or vice versa. If you had all the power in the world, what 3 things you would do to eradicate this problem? While hearing a narrative is one. Second, being a doctor, I may not be able to read everything. Can you point me to one authentic source of understanding the roots of this problem?
Firstly, the colonel there is not the only warrior we have amongst us. I'm sure in COVID, you've given your service, sir. For that also, you have my gratitude. You and the colonel, you gave services when people knew that death was staring you at the face. And those are not easy services and sacrifices to give. Insofar as authentic data or authentic research goes, what I've just enunciated to a young gentleman is data that comes from ideology that is not mine. So given that we are in a digital multiverse now, pick and choose your source of information. You have enough life experiences to know the truth from the untruth that is many a times told. I am grateful that you helped many a personnel survive, doctor. But insofar as reading up goes, I should tell you this, that we had close to 4 states heavily Naxal affected. One where many felt that the Naxal movement was given birth to. Today, it has been reduced drastically and is now restricted to only 40 districts. And let me say this, that in the next 5 years, you will see it completely eliminated. Most of the top commanders have been brought to death and justice. And those who raise arms against the Indian state will be met by justice. That is my belief. And when you ask me what is the root cause for taking up arms against your country, I will find absolutely no acceptance of any cause which makes me want to kill another human being in the name of freedom. Today, not only Naxal movement, we have an author at the back room there who is a Kashmiri Pandit. The colonel must have definitely served in those areas. We've had a genocide of a whole community in our country. Nobody spoke about them. So yes, as a nation, we will, in a dynamic situation, continue to meet challenges as long as we are resolute in ensuring that we provide solutions.
There's a lady there in the middle row, and after that maybe we can take the gentleman. Thank you.
Jai Shri Krishna, Smriti ji. It's really a pleasure to see you here, and I am always admire your speaking.
आप गुजराती हैं?
No, I am Marwadi.
Okay.
But believe in Krishna. That's why. I am Meenu Brijesh Vyas. I am a gemologist, and I felt pressure takes out your best. What you messaged us. I want to ask you just one thing, or आप इसको क्लियर कीजिए कि जो हमारा एजुकेशन सिस्टम है, हर घर में हर बच्चा बहुत स्ट्रगल करता है. अरे कम से कम तुम ग्रेजुएशन तो कर लो, तुम कम से कम पोस्ट ग्रेजुएशन तो कर लो. एक प्रेशर होता है उन पे, और उनकी नेचुरल स्किल वहां पे खत्म हो जाती है, क्योंकि उनको ग्रेजुएशन करते करते जो अंदर का टैलेंट है वो पेरेंट्स बिल्कुल एक प्रेशर में दबा देते हैं. तो आपका क्या मैसेज है? ये एजुकेशन सिस्टम हमारा कितना सही है? क्या ये होना चाहिए या ये बदलना चाहिए?
आप शिक्षा किसको कहती हैं मैम?
शिक्षा जो नेचुरल है उसको हम ग्रूम कर सके, उसको बाहर निकाल सके.
मेरा जो जीवन का एक्सपीरियंस है, मैं खुद 2 बच्चों की माँ हूँ और शिक्षा मंत्री रह चुकी हूँ
जी.
हमारे राष्ट्र के इतिहास में पहली बार जो हमारी विलेज एजुकेशन काउंसिल है, जिसके बारे में शायद बहुत ही कम लोगों को मालूम होगा, ऐसी 2.5 लाख विलेज एजुकेशन काउंसिल्स के साथ बैठकर नई शिक्षा नीति जो आप देख रहे हैं, जो मल्टीपल लैंग्वेज में हमारी एजुकेशन उपलब्ध हो, इन सब पे चर्चा करती है. लेकिन मैंने सो कॉल्ड बहुत एजुकेटेड लोगों के मुंह से बड़ी बातें ऐसी सुनी हैं जो कहीं ना कहीं ये संदेह पैदा करती हैं कि उनके लिए विद्या का मतलब क्या है.
करेक्ट.
तो इसीलिए मैं खुद अपनी पढ़ाई पूरी नहीं कर पाई थी, क्योंकि उस वक्त जेब में पैसा नहीं था. But I'm 45 now. I just finished a certification from Berkeley and from Cambridge. तो मुझे लगता है education is about lifelong learning. If you learn either from an institution or from life, if you skill or upskill yourself, that I think today is societally accepted as educating oneself. But I think that जो हमारी सबसे पुराना एक श्लोक है, विद्या ददाति विनय, वो विनय अगर आपके आचरण में है तो मेरी दृष्टि से आप सही में शिक्षित हैं.
We have 3 minutes left, so I'm going to take 2 questions and I'll take them together if that's okay with you, so that you can answer them both. We have a lady at the back and we have a gentleman over there. Can we just take those 2 questions, please?
मैं आपका अभिवादन करता हूं मैडम. भारत में एक भी विश्वविद्यालय, एक भी संस्थान ऐसा नहीं है जो कि हम विदेशों के से तुलनात्मक अध्ययन कर सकें. आज से 50 साल पहले जब राजस्थान यूनिवर्सिटी में मैंने ग्रेजुएशन किया, उस समय इस विश्वविद्यालय का नाम था. आज भारत में एक भी विश्वविद्यालय, IIT, अदरवाइज मेडिकल कॉलेज, ऐसा क्यों हो गया कि शिक्षा में इतनी गिरावट आ गई देश के अंदर? इस ओर सरकार का ध्यान नहीं गया. दूसरी ओर मैं आपका ये ध्यान दिलाना चाहता हूँ कि देश की रूट्स के अंदर करप्शन इतना गहरा हो चुका है कि कोई भी फाइल स्टेट लेवल के कर्मचारी की 1 से 2 मतलब महीनों और सालों घूमती रहती है. उसके लिए आपकी सरकार ने क्या किया? और तीसरी बात यह है कि
सर आप एक सवाल पूछें.
हाँ, 3 सवाल पूछूंगा. लास्ट ये लास्ट है. दूसरा, पूंजी का इतना मतलब वो हो गया कि पूंजी 2 वर्गों में विभाजित हो गई. एक अति पूंजीवादी हो गए, एक बॉटम में चले गए. तो पूंजी के समानीकरण के लिए, विकेंद्रीकरण के लिए अपनी पास क्या योजनाएं? मैं ये देखता हूँ कि
चौथा सवाल तो नहीं है भाई साहब, 3 ही सवाल है. चौथा सवाल है
नहीं?
ठीक है, महिला को एक पूछने दीजिए, तब तक जब तक माइक पहुंचता मैं जवाब देती हूँ. पहला तो सर, आप जिस शहर में हैं उस शहर में एक परिवार में नाना की तिजोरी में और पिटारे में कविताएं कुछ ऐसी थी कि उन कविताओं के माध्यम से एक बच्चे ने गणित ऐसा पढ़ा कि आज वो प्रिंसटन की सबसे प्रचलित मैथमेटिक्स फॉर नॉन मैथमेटिशियंस मंजुल भार्गव, उनको फील्ड्स मेडल ऑफ ऑनर मिला है, जो मैथमेटिक्स का नोबेल पुरस्कार. वो जयपुर के ही शहर से कविताओं के माध्यम से पढ़ के आज विदेश में पढ़ाते हैं. आप तुलना करना चाहते हैं हिंदुस्तान की दूसरे देशों के साथ और चाहते हैं कि हमारा देश, जिसकी संस्कृति इतनी अनोखी है, जिसकी क्षमता ऐसी है कि मात्र कविता से गणित का एक विशेषज्ञ हम विश्व स्तर पर दे सकते हैं, आप ऐसी तुलना करना चाहते हैं. लेकिन हाँ, ये भी सत्य है कि आज आपके दूसरे प्रश्न में प्रदेश की कांग्रेस सरकार पर कटाक्ष है। मैं प्रज्ञा को मुसीबत में नहीं डालना चाहती प्रदेश की कांग्रेस सरकार के बारे में कुछ बोल के। जहां तक तीसरी बात है, आज श्रीमती व्यास ने विशेष रूप से उल्लेख किया कि हम अपनी व्यवस्था प्रणालियों में ऐसा क्या परिवर्तन ला सकते हैं कि हमारे बच्चे एक उज्जवल भविष्य की न सिर्फ कामना करें बल्कि उसको चरितार्थ कर दिखाएं। उसके लिए जरूरी है कि हम स्किल्स पर उतनी तवज्जो दें, उतना ही भार दें जितना कि हम किताबी शिक्षा पर देते हैं। इसीलिए आज अगर स्किल का सबसे बड़ा प्रतिबिंब चाहते हैं भाई साहब, तो साल 2014 में नरेंद्र भाई ने कहा था डिजिटल रूप से साक्षर बनो। तब बहुत लोगों ने मजाक किया था, लेकिन कोविड के वक्त पता चला कि डिजिटल साक्षरता का मतलब क्या है। आज हिंदुस्तान में 4 करोड़ गरीब ग्रामीण अंचल से डिजिटली लिटरेट हो चुके हैं भाई साहब। शिक्षा क्या होती है और अंतरराष्ट्रीय स्तर पर हम कैसे compete कर सकते हैं, उसका एक छोटा सा उदाहरण आपको देती हूँ। There is a lady that you want me to answer to.
Yes, that's the final question.
Yes, ma'am.
नमस्ते मैम, मैं अंजलि शर्मा ब्यावर राजस्थान से। पहले तो मैं बोलना चाहूंगी आपके लिए कि तेरे माथे पे ये आंचल बहुत खूब है, तू इसे अपना परचम बना लेती तो अच्छा है, और आज हम ये परचम बना हुआ देख रहे हैं। धन्यवाद मैम। मैं चाहूंगी कि मैंने जब बड़ी हुई थी मैं, और मैंने टेलीविजन पे देखा था आपको, तुलसी।
मेरी उम्र आपने बता दी, वेरी गुड, थैंक यू। कि मैं आपको बचपन से देखती थी। अंजलि जी, आपकी क्या उम्र है?
मतलब
नहीं, उम्र बताओ, बताना पड़ेगा।
मैम आपसे 3 साल छोटी, 79।
तो फिर तुमने मुझे बचपन से कैसे देखा यार एक्टिंग करते हुए?
नहीं, अच्छा सॉरी सॉरी मैम, लेकिन बस ये चाहूंगी कि मेरी बेटी मेरे साथ आज है और मैं खुशनसीब हूँ, मैं आज आपको सुन पाई। तो
कहाँ है बिटिया?
मैम ये
सॉरी फॉर एम्बैरेसिंग योर मॉम।
पर इसके लिए 2 वर्ड्स मैम कि ये आगे चलकर अच्छा कुछ करे।
क्या नाम है बिटिया का?
गौरी।
ये खुद गौरी है। गौरी मतलब स्वयं साक्षात शक्ति का प्रतीक है। इसको एडवाइस की जरूरत है किसी नेता से? मुझे लगता है औरतों की सबसे बड़ी तकलीफ यह है कि हम किसी भी मंच पर हो दूसरी औरतों के लिए एडवाइस मांगते हैं। कभी किसी मर्द को देखा है दूसरे मर्द के लिए एडवाइस मांगते हुए?
नहीं मैम। स्मृति मैम, एक महिला को आगे बढ़ाती है और महिला का समर्थन करती है।
मैं गौरी को ये शुभकामना देती हूँ गौरी, कि एक दिन तुम ऐसा परचम लहराओगी समाज में कि माँ के साथ साथ मैं जब बूढ़ी हो जाऊंगी तो मुझे भी कैरी कर पाओगे। माय बेस्ट विशेस गौरी टू यू फॉर अ ब्राइट एंड सक्सेसफुल and a happy future.
Thank you very much. That's all we have time for. Thank you for listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pragya. It was a lovely conversation.